and welcome inside Semistate Rap edition of the Scores Table. Brian Haenchen, Danny Riego, Courtney Delks here with you. We're here to talk Semistate championship games from yesterday. Really fun day of basketball. This wraps up our Semistate coverage. We'll be diving into state championship preview stuff over the course of the next couple of days. For me on Indy Star, it'll start Monday. For Danny, Court, and I as a group, we're going to have some preview shows that we'll start taping tomorrow and Tuesday. Probably start posting those either Tuesday or Wednesday. Plenty to get to, guys, and let's start with the game that Danny and I were at, and Courtney was streaming online. That is Warsaw versus Hamilton Southeastern. Warsaw with a really invigorating win, a very fun win, 67-61 over HSE. I'll start off open-ended and get your guys' thoughts. Court, let's start with you.
Yeah, this is my first time seeing Warsaw watching a full game, and they're the real deal. Jocelyn Bricker goes out in the third quarter with her fourth foul with 5 minutes in that quarter, and it was the next girl up. Brooke Zartman steps up. She was 5 of 14 from three. Jocelyn only played, I think it was 23 minutes that game, and so they're a complete team. And the girl who really stood out to me, she fouled out, was Brooke Winchester, the senior. When she fouled out, she looked like a NFL running back, running through the defensive line of an opposing team, going to score a Super Bowl touchdown. She went to her coaches, her teammates, and was just let's go. And just that mental toughness. And on the other side, Hamlin Southeastern, the player that stood out to me in that game was KK Holman. Mm-hmm. She scored 4 unanswered there in the start of the half when they were down, drew the charge on Bricker to get her fourth foul, and she was really special and really poised during that game.
Yeah, speaking of Winchester, I don't know if it picked up on screen, but as Brooke Zartman stepped to the line for one of those free throw attempts to seal the game, Winchester was off the bench cheering her on, yelling at her, and encouraging her. It was really cool to see. And like you said, that was the most fired up reaction I think I've ever seen from somebody fouling out. But really cool moment for Brooke Winchester. And then after the game too, she was just so emotional and just so, I guess, a blend of relieved and happy to have gotten over the hump. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, no, I think Courtney touched on a lot of the highlights, and we'll dive deeper in some of those points. But I think it was a big program win for Warsaw. I kind of texted that this morning that it was a program win. And what I mean by that is it's Krebs and his staff. Super experienced staff, although they haven't been this deep in the tournament before. The fan base really showed out. The student section was unbelievable. And in also comparison to the HSE school section, the players, there just seemed to be connectivity. And then just being on the floor after the game. It wasn't Warsaw's basketball team beating HSE's basketball team. I kind of felt like it was just their whole community that just kind of won that game. And Hank, you were around there writing, and people were coming up to you talking about it. That's a program, and that's that is a community that really gets behind it. In fact, I was talking to somebody on the staff before the game, and they were talking about how there was even discussion as to why they didn't cancel the boys game earlier in the day, because it put the fan base at an impasse. They either had to go to the boys game at 2:30 or they had to skip the boys game and come down to the girls. But the timing did work out. They did win the morning game. But when they got down there, it was orange. It wasn't exactly the Tiger Den, because HSE's fan section was really good.
HSE showed up really well too.
They really did. And it made for a great environment. But Courtney's talking about people like Brooke and Bricker and all of that. But it goes all the way down to anybody that was in orange that day.
Yeah. Atmosphere, you could not have picked a better venue for that game. I was really concerned coming into the semi-state that they were going to get booted up to LaPorte and we'd be stuck up there again. But they got one that was relatively close for everybody. I think it was a 2.5-hour drive for Warsaw. It was reasonably close for HSE, which is nice for a change, because it seems like the Section Light champ kind of gets booted way up north. So, it made for an amazing atmosphere. Case Arena is such not only a cool place to watch a game, but it was the perfect size venue. LaPorte last year was just so cavernous. It felt cavernous, especially for the teams involved, because it's such a difficult trip for so many teams. It kind of took away from some of the environment. But last night was just phenomenal, just unbelievable. Perfect arena, perfect venue. Shouts to the fans for showing up. Let's dive deeper into the game, and I think the best.
So, hey, before you get to the game too, that was the first thing in my algorithm that hit. So when I picked up my phone on Saturday morning before I headed to the 10 a.m. game, and it's only an hour drive for me, the first tweet in my algorithm that pinned to the top was the police escort.
Really?
It was like 13 cop. I mean, it looked like a presidential like motorcade down to Case Arena. So
That's very cool.
Little side note, I was like, oh my gosh, like here comes Warsaw. Anyway, get to the game, Hank.
Yeah, let's talk first about Jocelyn Bricker, because that game tilted, as Courtney mentioned, when KK Holman picked up the fourth foul on Bricker there early in the third quarter. Danny, I did the math today, and it was a minus 11 with Bricker out of the game for Warsaw in the third quarter. I think it was a 16-0 run. I'll double check my notes here as we go through here, but a massive run for HSE that flipped what was an 8-point deficit into an 8-point lead, and suddenly things were unraveling on Warsaw. It felt like HSE's game to lose, and it wasn't, but it felt like that, like it was trending in that direction, just because everything was firing on all cylinders, and Warsaw almost felt deflated. But then it's amazing. Like, she just checks back in for the fourth quarter, and suddenly everything comes right back together. It's like you just pull a string, and it's all right back up and in perfect form. And you and I were I think the three of us were texting about it. I was texting a couple other people, talking to people next to me about it. But just the energy that Bricker breathes into that team and the confidence is amazing. And it's just like all the other pieces fall into place. And she had some big points. I'll look up the number here. She had 11 most of her 11 second half points over the final 8 minutes. Bricker did, as she led that team back, and just it's amazing. And then suddenly, like, she gets going downhill, and then things start opening up for Winchester, and then Zartman's able to get a few shots going inside, and that was just an unbelievable performance by her.
I think there's a lot to unpack with, if you're going to talk about Jocelyn Bricker last night. I think there's a ton to unpack. I have some mental notes too in regards to the numbers and the statistics to back up how valuable she was. But before we go on, I mean, let's not mention that she, 6 hours earlier, she was 14 of 19 from the field, 4 or 5 from 3, 34 points, 11 rebounds, 7 assists. I think I only had her for 1 turnover in my head. I think the book maybe said that she had 2 turnovers, but she was absolutely complete. I will throw a little thing in there that's kind of a red herring for something we'll talk about later, but I think she was 3 of 7 from the free throw line. So let's just kind of, like bookmark that comment. But Courtney's right. The critical play was the Holman charge draw against Bricker for her 4th foul. That happened at 5:51 left in the third quarter. And at the time, so Bricker goes to the bench with her 4th foul. And before we talk about Brick, that was a great play by Holman. And I know Bricker's mad about it. I mean, Neely tried to do it against Makaluski to foul her out of the game later. Like, that's just part of basketball. Like, Bricker's got to be smarter than that. Holman's really good at drawing fouls, but she goes to the bench and Warsaw's up 5. That is the longest 5 minutes and 51 seconds that you will spend as a coach. When you know that the kid that you have to have on the floor has 4 fouls, you need her in crunch time and winning time, and you have to sit there and watch HSE obliterate you. I mean, they ramped up the pressure. They got easy buckets for Holman and Makaluski. But HSE, I think, goes on that big run. They go up 43-35, all while Bricker's out. So Bricker's +5 when she goes to the bench, 32-27. She comes, the end of the third quarter score was 47-41. Bricker comes back at the beginning of the fourth, erases that 6 points that they're down immediately, and then they win by 6. So that's +5, +6, +6. That's a +17. You took it to the minus direction. So let me say what that statistic means. That means when Jocelyn Bricker was on the floor, Warsaw was 17 points better than the number 1 team in the state. 17. Like, that's how valuable numerically that kid was. And we can talk about what she does and the things that she does and the problems that she presented for HSE. But sometimes you can't argue with math. Like, she was the most important player last night. She might not have had I even looked at the box. I don't even know if she had game high or team high honors. I would assume that would have gone to other people because she sat. But +17 against HSE with Holman and Green and those defenders and Makaluski's length, like, that's incredible.
Go ahead, Court.
Yeah, the thing that stood out to me as well during that game is just the rule change to the 5 fouls. Like, I'm thinking in that game in the fourth quarter, and this is the old school me, but you have 7 fouls to give until the other team's in the bonus, and Warsaw was 24-25 from the free throw line. And so that worked completely into the Tigers' favor last night. And HSC, their defense and their pressuring is what they can thrive off of, and they can turn a game really quick getting those steals. But like when you're have the other team in the bonus, like there's just I don't know. I just felt like that was a factor in that game as well.
Agreed, Courtney. So they reached the penalty at 4 minutes, just over 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter. I actually leaned over to the people. I said, that's a huge storyline. And then I actually mentioned too, I said, Brick was 3 for 7. So let's see what she can do. But 24-25 as a basketball team needs another layer of discussion. It was different people. Like Bricker went to the line and hit 4 free throws. Winchester goes to the line and hits her free throws. And I don't want to say that that's been a struggle. I mean, I was sitting with their future college coaches at a game one time, and they were like analyzing her like free throw technique and things like that. She's going to get to the line a lot next Saturday. The free throws between her and Jemiah Thomas is going to be a big deal. But back to this. Then Neely comes in. She hits free throws. Then the technical, and Hank will unpack that. I'm not going to, we'll talk about that, the technical, which extended the basketball game. But when Winchester goes to the bench, here you have Peterson come in, who had been sitting there as long as Bricker was sitting there in the third quarter. She comes in, gets a defensive rebound, gets fouled, and she goes and knocks down 2. And then Zartman chokes him out at the line. That is 5 different players in the last 4 minutes of the game that stepped up to the line and hit clutch free throws. So you can say 24 of 25, and it's like, Zartman was up there hitting 11 of 12. No, this was like 5 different players in a 4-minute stretch. And I think that's championship medal. And I think that's one of the main reasons why we'll see them play next weekend is because they're clutch.
20 for 21 in the second half on free throws with Warsaw. And I mean, none of them were sweat.
21 free throws in the second half.
Made 20 of them.
Bonkers, man.
Yeah. It's really impressive. Really impressive. I'd like to throw in my final thought on this before we pivot. KK Holman was phenomenal. I think I was texting you guys and telling the people around me again that it felt like we were watching a future Miss Basketball battle unfold on our hands. And I kind of unpacked that a little bit in a column that's posted now on IndyStar.com. But last night felt like the beginning of the 2026 campaign. And if you thought the 2025 race was crazy tight, wait till you get a load of some of the names that are going to be in this 26 chase. And I listed out 4 to 6, I think, just off of performances last night. Didn't really dive super deep. It's very superficial, but it gives you an idea of just what we're looking at here. And as kids start building their cases, I mean, KK in the third quarter she was unbelievable.
That was absolutely a campaign and a statement, and in front of a lot of eyeballs too. There's a ton of people that wanted to watch that basketball game, not just live, but on stream also. My text was going crazy. And when I got home too, that was a lot of what I saw. And I don't know that she was the only 26 that made a statement in that game. We'll see how it plays out, right? KK Holman was fantastic. She may have solidified herself as the singular favorite. But number 10 on Warsaw, I mean, she was the lead in the show. We just talked about her. And then I would also add Brooke Zartman. Like Zartman shot 14 threes last night. Like, and I know we're talking about Holman, and it's just a quick thought on Zartman. Like, Zartman hasn't gotten 14 free clean looks since 2023. Like, she must have just been having so much fun last night. You could tell, like, with her
great
energy.
Sets for her. Like the sets that are running for her to get her open, like, were incredible. Like some of those actions that they had, both teams, honestly, but Warsaw in particular, since you're talking about them, like the screens that they set and like the way that they move the ball around to find her looks is just incredible. And then as soon as she gets the ball, it's like Maya during the season, we're just like, oh, she's gonna hit it. And it's like it's surprising. Those 2 kids, I tell you, it is surprising when they miss 3-pointers. Like I find myself like, oh, that's weird. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy. It's kind of the same way too with like a Jayla Lampley, a little bit Lola Lampley, just like, oh, that's weird, or when kids like that.
Yeah. But the other thing I like about Zartman, and I'll convert this really quickly back to Holman, is those kids play with such like energy. Like and they talk to each other, they talk to the other team, they engage with the fans. Like both of them, it was so like both those kids were just so magnetic to watch. Like Bricker is stoic, okay, and that's not a bad quality. That's just her quality. Zartman isn't stoic. Okay. Like Zartman is pointing at defenders. She's pointing at the fans. She's spinning around when she knows that she launches a three that's going to hit the net. Like, she's a fun kid to watch. But yeah, there was that stretch in the third quarter when Bricker was out of the basketball game where, I mean, Holman kind of danced all over Case Arena, and it was like, whoa, whoa. And I think you got a glimpse into what HSE will look like next year. And I know Maya was on the floor, but you know, Maya's season, inarguably, and just a note on her, I actually didn't know this coming into it. She broke Sydney Parrish's all-time scoring record last night, like at HSE. Like, and Hank, you'll talk about that. But even with her on the floor, Holman was just so effective in transition, so effective on the defensive end. And when she had those back-to-back and ones, like the same lift that Zartman gives the Warsaw and that entire community, she did that with the fan base. I mean, like Maya hitting a three and KK getting an and one. Those two things happen. The entire HSC fan base, like, just erects to its feet in applause. And so you got a glimpse into what that's going to be like next year. When you have to play HSC, you're going to get relentlessly attacked by KK Holman. It's awesome.
Court, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. Earlier, starting out, I talked about when the big for Warsaw went out with her fifth foul. It was like running through. But when Jocelyn Bricker fouled out of the game, and when Danny just mentioned, like, she's just stoic, like, there was no emotion. It was just this. I watched her. I was tuned into her body languages, and it was just this. She didn't have any emotion. It was just this confidence that she walked off like, next girl up on the team just going to step up, and we got this. There wasn't this poutiness. She didn't throw her hands up to the refs. She didn't pout. She just walked herself to the bench and gave high fives. I don't think she even said anything and just sat down. Like, that stood out to me on the mental poise of Jocelyn Bricker.
One last thought before we pivot on to another game, and we'll dive in. We'll be talking a lot of Warsaw, I assure you, over the coming days. I will be writing a lot of Warsaw over the coming days. So I'll give one more thought on HSE and just the theme that's been throughout the season, especially after that LC win at the Hall of Fame Classic, is just the depth and the different kids who stepped up at different moments. And obviously it's, you know, you start with the big three of Makaluski and KK and Kayla Stidham. But I mean, even last night, man, I mean, Addison Van Hosen had some big plays. Kayla Brindley really popped up. She had that 3-point play late, I think it was. And she made right before that, it went under the radar during that run. But I remember seeing her, she cycled over and got a hand up on Brooke Zartman on the 3-point line and denied her an open look. Where if Zartman would have gotten that look, she would have hit it and it would have been game over at that point. And I think it was still the third quarter. But Brindley did a great job of getting over there and denying her that look, and then got the basket on the other end shortly thereafter. And I mean, just a bunch of different kids stepped up. And I wrote about that after the game and encourage everybody to just check it out. It's just how different this year's HSE team was in terms of chemistry. I was around them a lot last year, and just the energy then compared to now is so different. Like they're truly like a family this year. And then that's something that Maya talked about. And what it took was just kids putting everything down and wanting to be a family, were her words. That's why we're here. And it was so cool seeing that and just talking to them and hearing how that transformation has took place. It took a lot of work, a lot of buy-in from everybody, but the difference in HSE last year versus this year was palpable. And honestly, it gets thrown around a lot, but that is why they were playing for a semi-state championship last night.
Yeah. And I think I just want to take the opportunity to just sign Maya out. I mean, I wore an Indiana sweatshirt today in honor of the punctuation of her high school career. But I mean, I've been around the HSC. I mean, I live in the school district. I've been around the HSC program for years and years. I've seen the all-time scoring record get broken by Taya Reimer, who was in 13, or excuse me, Courtney Osborne broke it in 2009. Reimer broke it in 13. Parrish broke it in 20, and now Makaluski. Like, I mean, Parrish, like, is, I mean, I don't like Katniss Everdeen of HSC. Like, I mean, it's just like she's the one that people follow, and it's Maya Makaluski that sits on top of that. Just a great career. I think people probably know that I'm close with Maya, and I just wanted to just give her flowers, because I think the things that she allowed us to do, and just the ups and downs, and watching her play basketball and watching her evolution grow as a person and a player, over the last few years was really special to me. And I just wanted to tell Maya, I guess, through this podcast, I guess. Thanks, Maya. I mean, it was fun.
We're going to move now from Class 4A down to Class A, move from where were we? The Case Arena down to the Slicer Dome gym thing up in LaPorte. We're going to go ahead and bring on Grace Openker. She had the other most exciting game of the night, an overtime game. Marquette Catholic falls to Lafayette Central Catholic 53-50. Grace, how did you survive overtime? I apologize for wishing that upon you last week.
It's okay. I had a feeling that when I went to LaPorte for baseball sectionals, there was a rain delay in overtime, and the game lasted like 3 hours. So I think it just happens when I go to LaPorte that I get caught in overtime.
That's a bad beat. That's a tough beat. So I guess I'll let you, Danny had a chance to screen the game, so I'll let you discuss it. But Grace, I just love an opening thought from you and what you took away from that game last night.
I was so impressed with Marquette's performance in the morning, and I thought they had such high energy. They weren't missing their shots. They were getting the steals, and I feel like it was a complete flip-flop in the evening. I don't think they were prepared to take on someone like Lafayette Central. Last night was the first time since January 9th when they played Hammond Central that they trailed at halftime, and I just think for them they weren't used to playing a competitive team. I mean, their past 10 games have probably been close to 15, 20-point leads, and I think that's when they struggled. Lanaya Davis had 2 fouls in the first quarter. She got her third quickly into the second, and so then she sat out majority of that second quarter before half, and I think that hurt them. She couldn't get her shots in, and normally when she's missing, someone else is picking up the slack, and that just didn't happen last night, and I think that was their downfall.
Yeah, I think, Grace, I mean, great catch. I mean, that I think was, I mean, I don't want to oversell it, but like when she picked up her third foul, she came in her first offensive possession, she came down and got a bucket, and then the first defensive possession picks up her third foul. So after she sat with 2, she came in for like what could only be 15, 16 seconds, and then picks up her third and then goes to the bench. Obviously a huge storyline. I mean, she was the alpha in that game. And she's been the alpha for Marquette Catholic, and a large reason why they were, one game away from getting to Cambridge's second time. But from a Lafayette Central Catholic perspective, the defensive game plan of Craig was the other main story there. So chew on this, Courtney. Lanaya Davis is their leading scorer, their best player, their primary offensive piece. And Craig and Lafayette Central box and won to Marissa Pleasant. They box and won to Robin, not Batman. And it was the entire basketball game. They box and won the second offensive option. And so Marissa Pleasant, who's she, right? She's the one that had the one shining moment, the one that extended their postseason run last year with the last second 3. This year, coming into the postseason, she was actually having her metrics were actually down from the 3-point line. But since the postseason started, that kid was shooting 56% from 3 with high volume. So now you have a box and one on Marissa Pleasant when Lanaya Davis is in the game. And then when Lanaya goes out, they go into a little bit of 1-3-1. They played some face guard man, but Craig had a good plan. I mean, it was an interesting plan. It was a good plan, and I think it kept Marquette Catholic off balance pretty much all night.
Grace, did Katie Clignan, did she talk about that defensive approach? Like, what were they expecting from LCC?
She didn't really touch on it. She had just said that Davis has been in foul trouble before early in the game, so it wasn't anything they weren't used to. Because kind of after the game, I was like, I know, like, Lanaya struggled with foul trouble, so do you think that kind of led to the loss? And she was like, no, our team always picks up the slack. And aside from senior Natalie Robinson, who had 16 points, no one else was there to make those shots. I mean, Livia Balling consistently tried to hit layups and they were just not going in.
Yeah, they had Balling and Robinson, and to show the confidence that Grace is talking about that Katie has, even when Lanai is in foul trouble or out of the basketball game. When they came out in the third quarter, Lanai even started on the bench, which tells me after an entire 10-minute frame of getting to evaluate the way you're going to attack that box and one, they felt that confident that I'm going to continue to shorten the basketball game with Lanaya on the floor and then run scheme. Now, it didn't last very long. I mean, maybe lasted only 90 seconds before she came back in the game. But I think that Grace brings up a good point, because it does show that if she's talking about how Katie was confident, it showed with the way that she rotated her kids in that game too.
And it seemed like, too, Grace, I mean, every time Marquette Catholic got up a little bit, like the 4-point lead, 2-point lead, every single punch they threw, LCC punched back, and they punched back pretty immediately. I mean, that was pretty impressive to see on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, especially Carly Barrett's half-court shot before halftime at the buzzer. Yeah. I mean, those shots they normally don't go in, and for that to go in at a semi-state championship game, that's what Lafayette Central needed, and it just worked out better for them last night.
How did Marquette Catholic respond to that out of the break? Like, did they look deflated at all, or were they pretty quick to bounce back in the third quarter?
No, I thought they were confident. I mean, they were still trying to get the shots up. It just, they weren't going in. I never felt like Marquette was hanging their heads throughout the game. I did feel like they were determined to come back. They just struggled to maintain a lead.
But
any other thoughts? Oh, go ahead, Danny.
Yeah. So, an additional thought, I think Lafayette Central Catholic is a likable team. I mean that matters to nobody but me. I like them, but Maddie Bruce, she was the kid. It wasn't Carly Baird. It wasn't Bourdonnais, right? Bourdonnais, right, Hank?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was Maddie Bruce that was the one who drew the Marissa Pleasant assignment. And there was this cool moment that the stream caught where Maddie Bruce actually ended up at the free throw line in a really high pressure situation and knocked down 2 free throws because they were in the penalty. She missed the first, and it was kind of cute. Like, she looked at her teammates and was like, she goes, I'm sorry. Like, she apologized to him. And Grace Bourdonnais looked at her and was like, no, you're good. Like, step up and make this. Like, you're good. Those things like that are caught on stream, and sometimes these streams, you guys know, they're not television productions, right? So you're just kind of seeing the scheme from way up at the top of the bleachers, but it caught it, and I just think those are likable qualities for kids. I mean, I think every team needs a Grace Bourdonnais. Yeah, Grace mentioned Carly Barrett and the big plays that she made throughout the game, but that's relatively expected. And not to say that it wasn't expected for Maddie Bruce. But it was deeper than that. Like Brooke Thompson, who's a freshman. I mean, we talked about her when we interviewed Grace and Carly, right, Hank?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Monster.
Yeah.
Monster corner 3 in that game. A monster. And just like Bricker and her stoic self, the freshman just ran back. She wasn't pumping her fist. She wasn't yelling, let's go. Like, she just ran back and got in her defensive position and got her hands up. Like, it's a likable team with a lot of winning qualities. They have five players that can dribble, pass, shoot, defend, and then they've got a coach that's willing to say, you know what, we're going to go box and one on the second best player, and all these kids are like, all right, cool, let's go, let's roll. It's awesome.
Grace, a final thought from you on the Class A game that I wanted to ask you just real quickly about Valpo.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we expected that Valpo was going to come out short. I'm glad that they tried to compete throughout the game, but definitely an upset for them. But at the same time, I mean, you played the number 1 team in the state. Obviously, it's unfortunate that HSE went on to lose in the championship game, but I mean, Valpo had a good run. And they're returning their starters next year, so I think they're only going to get stronger.
I was gonna say you've got. I mean, both of those teams, Marquette Catholic and Valpo. It feels like the brighter days are ahead for both of them with everybody
Yes.
they have coming back, and considering what some of the other contenders in that their respective class are graduating. I mean, it sets up pretty nicely where this is just sort of like the foundation for what we see from them in the future.
I agree. I think Valpo and Marquette will still have solid teams for sure next year.
Yeah. Well, Grace, thanks so much for jumping on with us and helping us out throughout the season. It's been a blast, and yeah, we'll be in touch again soon, I'm sure.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks, Grace.
Hi, Grace.
Grace Opinger, NWI.com. You want to jump down over to down south with our friend Kyle Stokeland?
Wherever you want, Hank.
Let's do it. Let's do it, and then we can have fun amongst ourselves. Hi, Kyle.
Good morning, guys.
How are you?
I'm tired because I spent 12 hours in basketball gyms yesterday, but it's a lot better now.
Did you get to stay in one gym or did you bounce? You bounced around, right?
No, yeah, I was at New Albany for the morning for Evansville Central Greensburg, and then went to Jasper to watch South Knox.
Oh my God, that sounds horrible. I thought Logansport to Frankfurt was bad, but I tipped my cap, man. That's insane. Let's start with the first game in Greensburg, Evansville Central. Kyle tweeted out yesterday, and we were texting about it, that he thinks Greensburg is probably top 5 team in the entire state, regardless of class.
That's my opinion. I mean, they're probably the second best team I've seen all season because I watched HSC twice back in December. Gosh, they can score the ball 1 through 5. It didn't matter who had the ball. Because at first it was I forget her name, Larison. She took over in the second quarter and gave them just to pad the lead. But then every single shot, it was going in. And it wasn't just in the first look. They found the right look almost every single possession. And Central basically just said, we couldn't catch a break. It's like they couldn't miss, which means we couldn't fight our way back. So I told Coach Simpson, that team is really, really good. And I'd be surprised, no offense to nothing Norwell, but I'd be surprised if they don't win a state title.
Yeah, they're so good. I don't know. So I watched a large portion of Greensburg's day of going 1-0 twice to help out Jason Simpson with his message there. In the second game, I mean, they were anything but sharp. I mean, they were traveling, they were throwing it away on press offense. Jason got pretty animated one time when they had inside opposite position on an offensive rebound. I got beat on a 50-50 ball. I think it was actually think it was Larison. They were having trouble defending without fouling. They kept Ron Colley in the night game in the game because they just kept putting them on the line. They were anything but sharp, and they just won with relative ease. I know the Greensburg, I probably didn't feel like that, but it definitely looks like that when you streamed the game because of all the things that Soak said. They just make Larison doesn't if you go under there's an action in their offense where they set a side ball screen. Okay. Just like everybody's offense, just it has a side ball screen option in it. And when you go under, it is true as gravity. It's going to be 3 points if you go under on Larison. She's really good at shooting over that screen, and it's just money. They just make plays. I'm not going to steal any of Soak's thunder, but one of the greatest individual performances on the other side, and they won by 25 in the morning game. Greensburg is a basketball team where you can try to find a reason why they're not going to win, but good luck. Because they're complete, and even when they don't play well, they win going away. I mean, if they're going to play well, they are. You said top 5, Hank. I'm not sure they couldn't beat the 4A champ.
And then they got Mary Harmon back yesterday.
Yeah, how about that? That might have been the most surprising, and great news. Obviously, development of the day.
Yeah, I asked Jason straight up. I was she has a broken collarbone, right? And he said 2 weeks post-op, she had it in her mind to play, even if it was 5 minutes. And he kept going over. The doctor put her through every range of motion test, and he kept telling her, "You're not going to pass this one. You're not going to pass this one." Passed every single test, and if it was only 2-minute spurts just to give the starter some rest, Jason was like, "Yeah, I want her back." And she hit 2 corner threes to end the second quarter and the third quarter, which didn't decide the game, but it was like this huge emotional lift because it was Mary making them. Like everyone on my side of the gym just erupted. If they can get her for, again, 5 minutes of that state championship game, it's another ball handler, another shooter, clearly. I mean, that's just another piece for Greensburg.
I agreed with Soak. It looked like when she was first subbed into the basketball game that it was just going to be, almost just pageantry. Like, we're going to put you in for 60 seconds so you can be a part of this. But then later in the game, Emma McQueen gets hurt. She's okay, by the way. She came back in and played. It didn't look good at the time. But when Emma McQueen got hurt in the Roncalli game, like their options were Mary Harmon and Kaylin Adams, who's a freshman. And they put in Kaylin Adams, but then Jason felt like he needed the extra ball handler and comes in with Harmon. She ended up playing like major minutes in that game. That was anything but, hey, we're just going to put Mary out there so she's going to be a part of it. She's going to play next weekend. She just has to. And I mean, I'll say this because I have some level of education within, orthopedics. Like that's supposed to be like a 12-week like injury. Now, I'm not saying that she came back too early. I mean, the doctors cleared her and all that, but it's really something like to see her. And Soapbox talked about the emotional lift, but the ball handling lift, like the schematic lift, just the strategic lift, the talent lift. Like
when we talked to Jason before regionals, I didn't get the sense that he was expecting her to come back.
Not at all.
If my recollection serves me correct, I believe the quote was, we lost our starting point guard, Mary Harmon, for as long as our run is going to be in the last regular season game, I think is a paraphrased quote. Really something. And good, and honestly, good for her. Yes, good for her. It's better this way.
Yeah. Kyle, Danny alluded to it, but I mean, Evansville Central, Maddie Shirley. Oh my God. I don't know what else to say other than, oh my God.
Everyone who ever asked me about her, maybe I'm just desensitized to what she does because I watch her so much. But when she kept scoring and kept getting closer and closer to the eventual point total, I was like, yeah, that's what she does. That's what she had 46 points, which I looked it up was tied for 8th most in state tournament history in a single game. Like I had to redo the math every 2 minutes just to make sure I was correct. 46 points, 13 rebounds, 13 of 16 from the line. And it was straight up. Greensburg was like, you go ahead, you try to beat us on our own, and she almost did.
That's insane. Court, what's the most points you ever put up in a tournament game?
A tournament game? I don't know. I don't remember. Maybe
45.
Like 20s, 30s. I remember having a 50-point game in the regular season.
I was there for the 50 piece.
Yeah, but
I mean, 40.
Game, that's tough. That's tough.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Basically, just the game plan, and he alluded it to Pete Maravich. Like, the problem is if you double or triple team her, it leaves everyone else open and at least makes them comfortable to take open shots. The plan was put West or Larison on Shirley to try to give some size and length, and everyone else is going to have a hard time. Just put a hand in their face. Do not make them comfortable. I don't think he wanted 46. It was, gosh. I really don't know what else to say about her because, again, I see it all the time, and I keep thinking, yeah, she gets 33, she gets 35. Okay, that's Maddie. 46 is ridiculous.
46 against an undefeated
number one team in the state.
With Larison,
just said might be a top 5.
Yeah, and with Larison getting part of that assignment too, like it's somebody who we've actually seen on film and live take on kids like Hannah Menser and things like that. But it's for me, it's her ability to score under contest. It's that high release point. You can't block the shot, but then to get over 40, Courtney knows this. You got to get to the line. 16 free throw attempts. That's a lot of free throw attempts. So you couple those two things, her ability to score under contest and getting to the free throw line. And then you add in her out of range rebounding on the offensive side. I mean, I think you tweeted maybe a highlight package or something. I mean, a lot of that highlight package is just her going out and grabbing an offensive rebound with two hands and finishing at the rim. It was complete. Very, very, very big statement made, as big of a statement as you could make in an L, I guess.
That was just unbelievable. Oh my goodness. Any final thoughts here on Greensburg, Evansville Central in general before we move on to Class 2A in South Knox?
I mean, just a super fun game because it was, I think, 83-71. I mean, that's high level basketball between two very good teams. It's such a fun start because it was 19-15 after a quarter. Greensburg just had too many players. Just like after Maddie, they probably had the next at least 3 or 4 best players on that list.
Yeah. I mean, I just mentioned their names. Wilkinson made big plays all day. Powers made plays all day. Leah West is awesome. I mean, they're a wagon.
Yep. We'll dive in more on the state champion finals teams. That was a sentence. We'll have more on the finalists here over the coming days on the scores table and IndyStar.com. Class 2A, Kyle, you saw South Knox take it on Heritage Christian down in Jasper. Just a phenomenal atmosphere. And Ella Bobe used Saturday as kind of a statement afternoon for her.
Yeah, and Holly, the first thing she said when I asked about Ella, and I admit there's some bias to this, but her quote was, "How can they leave her off the All-Star team now?" But I have no say in that, and neither does anyone in this chat. But there's a little more oomph to her that topic because she went for 33 against Park Heritage, 26 against Heritage Christian. Most of that after the first quarter. Like, in my opinion, those games usually come down to your best player making plays, and they just gave her the ball either on the block, on the 3-point line. She just outworked any defender that went against her. Like, she is a player.
Just unbelievable. And it's the same thing like we see with like Gabby Spink, just to relate it to another team, like just seniors making big plays and big moments. And my God, Ella Bobe.
Yeah, I mean, because it was a 6-point game at halftime. Like, South Knox looked a little sluggish in the second quarter, couldn't make any shots other than Ella on the block. She comes out, hits 3 big threes in the second half. It just like erupts the building, which was probably 95% South Knox. You can see in my videos, the entire other side of the court is blue, and even some of the people to my right. Gosh, what she does is just elevates the entire team. Like, Bryn Hill had a double-double, and we're talking about Ella Bobe because she was that good. Yeah. Like, USI has a steal, in my opinion, just for an OVC player. And she just comes from a basketball-minded family because her brother played at UE and her older brother was a point guard. Like, she had to literally work and earn through her own house just to get any talent. And she's just clearly one of the better players in 2A left.
She lets it come to her, too. She lets the game come to her. Right? There's a lot of trust with her teammates and a lot of trust with Holly because when she's uninvolved, she's the one player that Holly will bring the game to. I mean, if you're going to ask your players to wait for the game to come to you and it doesn't come, Holly brings it to her. There were a couple of possessions in a tight basketball game last night when Heritage Christian was still close in the first half where she ran some like post action and just got her isolated on the block on the left hand. So Bobe seems to be that kid. So you mentioned Bryn Hill. She's playing at a really, really high level right now. But that's my parting shot with South Knox is Ella Bobe and Bryn Hill. And you haven't even touched Kendall Hill, who I still think got not robbed or snubbed. That's not the right word, but
overlooked.
She was omitted from the Hall of Fame all tournament team and had one of the 5 best resumes there. I mean, she just did. I don't know who you're going to kick off, but she was really good. I saw him live one time where Grace Detweiler, I think, hit 5 threes. Madison Parrish has been the best player. You talk about Greensburg being a wagon in relativity to their class. South Knox is a bigger, faster, more powerful wagon than they are in relative to class. So you get to cover 2 pretty resounding favorites, I would suppose. But I don't know. I'm done trying to figure out ways that South Knox is going to be in a close game, very similarly to Greensburg.
I thought it was kind of happening. Like, they weren't making shots. It was 6 points. Holly said she couldn't repeat what she said in the locker room to light a fire under them. But it also never felt like it was out of hand. Like, they just pulled away in that third quarter. They really held the ball. They didn't even shoot a free throw in the fourth quarter. They were just up so much and moving the ball around. They couldn't foul them.
It's going to be a really interesting state championship matchup because Rensselaer is long. Like, they are very long. And that's what got Sheridan I talked to the seniors afterwards, and I talked to the coach after, and one of the players was like, you get past one player, you can't see over him, but you finally get past one, and there's another one right behind her, ready to take you on, and they come at you in waves like that. And we talked about a lot, Danny, leading into it. You've seen them on film, but seeing them up close in person, I mean, they are an intimidating bunch, and I'm really curious to see how South Knox addresses and matches up against that length. But the other side of it is, and this was kind of the thing with Lanesville too, is just Rensselaer have enough scoring. Like they had trouble scoring the ball a little bit there against Sheridan. Same thing in the nightcap against Eastside. But part of that, I kind of wonder if the Logansport rims, which is a thing. Sheridan's coach was talking about there, to just very unforgiving rims. So I'm curious, maybe if Gamebridge is a little different, how that plays in. Maybe that's a weird element that nobody knows. But of the teams that I've seen from 2A on film, and honestly a bunch of teams in 3A and a few teams in 4A, I feel like Rensselaer might be the one to give them a run for their money, but South Knox still obviously a runaway favorite.
Yeah, last year.
Any closing? Oh, go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, this is my closing thought there. Last year, when in the same class in 2A, you would watch Fort Wayne Lures, who ended up winning the state championship. You would watch them on film and be like, this just looks like a state championship team. They seem to have all of the pieces. They have some matchup problems. They have some things unique that would lead you to believe that no one would beat them, and no one did. You get the same sense when watching Rensselaer Central. I mean, Drone and Roland and Van Meter and kids like that. I'm anxious to kind of dive in and really kind of take a look at them. We talked about the 1-2-2 zone that they played against Hosier, and they didn't sell one defender out to box and one, or they just trusted their length and their athleticism. They have that same look that Lures did. I just got there a little bit later. But the unfortunate piece about it is South Knox will be a resounding favorite in that game. It's just a matter of timing in the year, I guess. You just end up having the best team in the North, while the best team in the South is one of the best teams in the state, regardless of class. So tough break for Rensselaer Central, but also fantastic because they're going to get their shot to prove everybody wrong. And I'm with you, Hank. I mean, I'm with you. They're very difficult to score against.
Kyle, closing thought from you before we let you go, get some sleep.
Yeah, no, that was a fun day of basketball because I watched 4 pretty good teams, 2 of the best in Indiana. I mean, plus we get another year of Maddie Shirley here in Evansville, so I can't complain really much.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again, buddy, for jumping on with us, and we'll be talking here this week.
Absolutely.
See you, Soak.
Kyle Soakland of the Evansville newspaper joining us. Real quickly, too, we should mention Roncalli in that they fell to Greensburg in that championship game, but Roncalli, again, I mean, just they find ways to win. They grind it out against Cathedral, or they didn't grind it out. They pulled away from Cathedral. Greensburg had only allowed 55 or more points twice this season to Silver Creek and Evansville Central. Roncalli put up 58 on them. And, I mean, it was in a losing effort, but, I mean, that's impressive against that Greensburg team, which, again, same with Maddie Shirley. You have to contextualize. That's a top 5 team in the state, regardless of class potentially. So to do that for them is impressive. Just super bright future. Honestly, it feels that way same with Heritage Christian, same with Cathedral. I'll lump them all together so we can move on. But just super bright future, especially there at Roncalli with Elliot Leffler. You have Brenna Cerny back for another year, right? Lydia Staley back for another year. So a lot of great pieces there. Katie Roscoe as well. A lot of great pieces for them to build around at Roncalli. Same thing at Cathedral, as we mentioned too, with the Wiggins kid, and then over at Heritage Christian too, with their leading scorer being a freshman as well, Riley Johnson, and then Trinity Taylor, the junior, the 5'11" forward. So a lot of great pieces for them to build around, and tip of the cap to all those schools for their big runs. And going into the nightcap, it felt like Greensburg and South Knox were obviously the favorites, but there's just that little bit of doubt in the back of the mind. They were good enough to plant that doubt. The local schools were, at least, that maybe they could pull off some magic. We'll save the 4A final, I think, for last. Let's touch on Columbia City versus Norwell. Norwell pulls away for a win down the stretch. They get back to Gamebridge Fieldhouse. Danny, I know you had a chance to screen it. I was following along as best I could from Victoria Jacobson on Twitter. So I will let you lead the conversation when you're ready.
Yeah. So Norwell's back in Gamebridge for the second time in as many years. And I just want to revert back to something that Eric Thornton had when we had him as a guest on the podcast. I mean, he said things like he said sentences like, like been in my system since 5th grade. And so like all of these kids are just running the basics of like their dribble drive and their 1-3-1 for like a literal decade. But by the time they get to varsity, what that does for the coach is it allows him to be able to coach detail. It allows him to coach nuance. It allows him to coach variation, scout specificity within that system. And that's kind of the lead into this. Eric Thornton was really good in this game. We'll get into the Baxter foul trouble, but I mean, Courtney, I know you have perspective on this because you've been around Eric, you've been around that program. He changed some things from the first. I mean, and the reason why I can say that, I didn't talk to Eric, but I watched the first Norwell Columbia City game and then the second Norwell Columbia City game, and it was different. He coached some nuance and he changed things for Scout and he changed things to make them unbalanced, and it worked. And we'll talk about some of those things, but Eric Thornton, I don't know if he would say that that he's exceeded the expectation of this basketball team, but he exceeded my expectation for the basketball team. Like, he's in state after graduating. Mackenzie and Kennedy and the rest of that class is really, really a great accomplishment. So congratulations to him. He must have had a great week. So, but Courtney, I mean, Eric Thornton and Norwell, before we get into the game.
Yeah, up in the north, where I live. I mean, he's a legendary coach. He's a staple, and I think this is just a staple going back, back to the finals. And I've been up there and have worked with their youth program. And you go to Norwell High School in the springtime when kids should be running track, they should be playing softball, doing whatever, and they'll have 60 plus youth kids in that gym that are doing fundamental work. The kids want to be there. You have high school kids that are coming in and getting extra work. And there's no doubt in my mind that feeder systems and having great coaches and great leaders is why Norwell keeps just going back. Like, you can't go against that.
So 3 points in the game, Hank. Like the Eric Thornton, number one, I talked about the nuance. It didn't seem like he played the 1-3-1 the same way. It almost looked like an extended 2-3. And I think the reason why he did it, and I'm just doing this from my own critical eye, Addie Baxter in Columbia City had a lot of success throwing over the 1-3-1 up the line. And he went to this 2-3. It took up line out of the it took that out of Addie's hands. So that was a little nuance. Addie actually turned the basketball over in the second possession of the game because she tried to throw in the middle because she didn't have that same upline read. Like, to say that that nuance didn't make them uncomfortable just isn't true. Like, Addie actually pointed to herself, like, my bad. Like, I just didn't think that person was going to be there. They haven't been there all year and they weren't there. They made a play, so on and so forth. But Vanessa Rossworm was really special last night, Hank. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to hear your comments on this because we had her on the pod, and I know you started to familiar yourself with her game a little bit. But, I mean, she hit a 3 to close the first quarter. She hit another 3 to close the third quarter. I didn't stat the game. I would guess, just looking at it, she probably finished with 25-ish points, I would guess. I think I heard the telecast say that she had 17 at the end of the 26. Third quarter. She had 26. Mm-hmm. I mean, she looked like, and now Baxter was out of the basketball game, but she looked like the best player on the floor, and she looked like a kid that could lead a basketball team into Gainbridge and give anybody, Greensburg notwithstanding, everything that they want. So Vanessa Rossworm, Hank, I think is going to be a big storyline this week.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I mean, just the success, like you said, like, it's kind of unprecedented because they graduated so much, but it's easy to forget and overlook just kids like Vanessa Rossworm and they're just sitting there. They're waiting for their turn. They're biding their time. They're competing and getting better by practicing against those seniors that just graduated. And for a kid like that, like Eric talked about it, like her going up to him and saying, "I'm ready for this." Like, I loved playing with last year's seniors. Don't get me wrong, but I'm excited, and we're all excited to run it back with this group. And I tip my cap. I thought of them as one of the favorites in the 3A North. I wasn't sure they'd be able to get by Columbia City just with the Addie Baxter of it all. But, I mean, to do it the way they did is just so impressive. And on the other side, Addie Baxter almost single-handedly led Columbia City back into that game based on the tweets that I was reading. I mean, just a phenomenal way to go out. It sucks to lose, but nothing to hang their heads down about over there because they were in a similar situation where they graduated so much around her and were so inexperienced coming into the season. And we talked about it with her. Just point blank, they didn't look very good at the beginning of the year. So to see them now playing for a semi-state and looking so much better is just so impressive to see. But yeah, that Norwell Greensburg matchup is going to be fascinating. Just how does Eric adjust his defense? Eric Thornton, that is the Norwell coach, adjust his defense to contain what Greensburg brings, and how do they match up? I think depth is going to kind of be the thing that I'm most interested in, and just how both coaches manage their benches and whatnot, and what happens if somebody gets in foul trouble. How's the game going to be officiated? How does it impact things and that sort of thing? So that's going to be a very fascinating matchup that I'm excited to dive deeper on.
I want to talk about the Baxter foul trouble, because this is, I think a lot of people wanted to see Addie play in Gainbridge. So this will almost punctuate her on this episode. But before I do that, Hank, you covered Norwell at the Noblesville Holiday Tournament, maybe, right?
That's
and you
right,
had a lot of thoughts. You were texting a lot about it. I'll ask it to you this way and have you comment on it, or plug a story if you'd written about it. But did you walk out of the Holiday Tournament thinking this is a team that can get to Gainbridge?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, like that was the game where it's like they were not only hanging with Noblesville, I think they were up on Noblesville.
Okay.
And they took them to overtime, if memory serves. And then one of the clips in the beginning, Kate Rollins, I think, hit that big shot, like an and one play to either force overtime or that came in overtime. But yeah, either way, like they were going punch for punch with them. They looked like they belonged. And it was really impressive. And then too, like you just, at that point, you kind of you look at the schedule and start paying a little bit closer attention to it. And unlike last year when they were getting blown out by a lot of these good teams, and it was like, oh, did I schedule too much, but how are the girls going to respond to these tough losses? It was, ooh, they're right in this thing. Ooh, this team is really making some noise here. Like they're hanging with, I think it was Homestead. I'll look it up here in a second, but they're hanging with these teams and competitive with them. They might have something there. And then seeing that confirmed as I watched them against Nobles, I absolutely walked away from there thinking, oh, we could see this team playing Cambridge. And I think on the pod that week, I think you and I even discussed like, hey, this thing's probably going to come down to Columbia City, Norwell, depending how the draw goes in the North.
Your Sol Frank take that week aged very well. I think she had 4 first half threes, was a huge weapon in the game. It allowed Rossworm to kind of settle in. So your prognostication on Sol Frank being a major piece played out really well on a very big moment and on a very big stage. But the Baxter foul trouble, I don't even know where I want to go with this. It was the story of the game. Okay. And Addie's a stoic kid too. Okay. She was anything but in this basketball game. She was very frustrated with the way that the whistles were happening. So I think the way to explain this, I think I would ask the audience, you're going to have to probably use your mind's eye. But midway through the second quarter, when Baxter went to the bench, it was 23-17 Norwell. So they were up 6. Then she subbed out. Norwell would stretch the lead to 13 at the half and 17 at the end of the third quarter. So Baxter's fouls does tell us that it was the plot story the rest of the game. But they were never closer once Addie picked up her third foul. But here's what I think is interesting. When they brought her back in the basketball game, and this is what I mean when you have to use your mind's eye. We talked about how Norwell runs dribble drive. Dribble drive puts basically these are the basics of it, one player in each of the 4 respective corners, and then one player in what a lot of systems call the dunker spot. That person is kind of on the block behind. When they brought her back in, because Norwell was switching everything, they put Addie on the dunker. So she guarded the post player, which is really counterintuitive when you're in foul trouble, but you can't, when you're in switch, you can't control who your matchup is. And I think I get why Amy did it. It's because you don't want her to get on a switch in Rossworm, and then Rossworm gets downhill all of a sudden, and then you got your 4th foul. But you're trying to attack the dunker. I mean, like Kobe calls those blocks, like he calls them kill boxes. Like in the dribble drive, you're trying to get the ball there. That put Addie at the point of attack in every single drive. And I think the volume of her just being involved caught up to her. That's how she picked up her 3rd foul. That's how she picked up her 4th foul. And then she had to take a flyer on the 5th foul and try to draw a charge. They were down 6 with under a minute left. She had to do that. So and her feet were probably moving. I mean, it could have gone either way, but I just thought maybe just kind of an interesting thing there, because I think if Amy had to do it again, I think she probably, like I said, obviously they got beat. So I think she would obviously do it differently. But that was something where I was like, man, now you're putting Addie in contest on Rossworm and all of that. I just thought it was one of those interesting nuanced, on the fly decisions that Amy had to make and Columbia City had to make. Addie obviously rolled with it. But now you also have that person, because they're so spread. Now you have little resistance on offensive rebounding, defensive rebounding. I mean, Addie's down there trying to fight for things with 3 and 4 fouls. It was just very difficult. And when Addie Baxter doesn't have fouls, she can't attack with the level of aggression that she needed to, because in fears of picking up another charge. So I just wanted to provide some context, because somebody's going to say, hey, well, Addie was in foul trouble. But it when she played, I mean, like, there are other kids that are in foul trouble, right? She was just at the point of attack every time, and it was a very difficult watch. I wasn't rooting for Addie, but I was kind of rooting for Addie a little bit. It was a difficult watch, because I'm like, man, she's going to pick up her 4th here, and just watching it, it's just so. Those are my thoughts. But congratulations on a great career, Addie. Norwell.
It's gonna be a fun final.
It is going to be a fun final. And Eric is I mean, he'll dive into that film. Eric Thornton versus Jason Simpson, from a coach's perspective and preparation, is going to be a fantastic test of wits in film study.
So we have media day tomorrow with all the state finals coaches and select players, and I'm expecting that they'll both have full breakdowns of each other by then. So I'll just going to sit in between them and just listen to them break down each other, and then listen to each other break it down. For however long that we're able to do that for. One other game we should mention too, that Borden moves on with a very impressive win over Northeast Du Bois. Also kind of expected, still really, really impressive the way that they handled their business. I mean, they left no room for doubt. Borden, another one of those teams similar to Rensselaer Central, similar to Greensburg to an extent, similar to Warsaw, where it's like they've gotten through finally, and they're not really leaving any room for doubt, any room for questions, anything like that. South Knox as well, obviously, too, where they're just clobbering teams and rolling through, and that'll be a fun matchup with them and the 6th-ranked team in Class A in Lafayette Central Catholic. One other game, obviously, that we have left to talk about, that is Lawrence North versus Pike. LN comes out with a 45-44 win. Kyle Neddenrip has a story up on that for us on IndyStar.com. I love this opening from Kyle, though, where he talks about how, as the LN girls basketball team's walking out, a woman in green and red shout in their direction, "Ladies, great job, but you're going to put me on heart medication." as the Cardiac Cats plot another one, 45-44 over Pike. And I mean, I'll start the conversation with this. Pike was the hottest team in the state coming in, and LN still got down early, battled back, found a way to pull it out. And just, I mean, that team, it's a different team, as we've said before, but they're finding ways to get it done game after game now, and it's really fun and impressive to watch.
45-44, the score would indicate that it was a defensive struggle, or like a really good defensive game, coupled with some offensive struggles. I know Pike got some good looks, they just didn't hit them. But I want to shout out Stephen Thomas, because LN played zone, okay, and he did something that I'm not sure that he's done. I'm going to pause here, because, Hank, I want you to think about it as I say it. In a 2-3 zone, forget the top. We talk about how it's like stacked and tandem and all of that. Just think about he moved Jemiah Thomas from the middle to the wing. And that is a very minor nuance that had very major implications, because Jemiah gets in foul trouble. And I think Steven probably went into that game, having not texted with him, having not talked to him. He probably went into that game and said, we don't win unless I have Jemiah Thomas on the floor. So he moved her. And it puts kids like Naja Winston and Ashaya P to go battle Marley Jeffers and Kamari Booker and high-low in that zone. But Jemiah played. She played virtually the entire basketball game. If somebody told me that she never came out of the game, I would believe you. But as I was watching this game, I'm just like, Steven, my man, like that nuance probably, I don't say won you the game, but it was a huge step into protecting Jemiah Thomas. And then on the offensive end, so all she's doing is closing out to corner 3. Man, she was effective last night. She was really effective last night. And I will also say he's not the only one that was dealing in that. Pike played man. Okay, so LN plays zone with the change. How many times have I talked about how good of an on-ball defender Kamari Booker is? I mean, you guys have heard it just at length, right? Here she is guarding Menser, and here she is guarding Duvall, Lily Graves. Who's he going to guard? The smart money would have been Keith is going to put Kamari Booker on either Kaya Hurt or Kiki Butler. He didn't do that. He put her on Naja Winston and planted her right on the logo in the paint. And so Keith is probably thinking, we don't win the game if we can't keep Kiki Butler and Kaya Hurt out of the paint. So he even adjusts and he takes his best defender and plays her off the basketball against a kid who he wanted to take a high volume of shots, whether it was Teague or Winston or whatever, planted her there. And so now Steven has to adjust to what Keith did. Keith has to adjust to what Steven did. And it was fantastic to see two great young coaches in Indianapolis really in their bag.
That is fascinating. Man, Courtney, you got a chance to watch some of that game, right?
Yeah, I was tuning in, just kind of checking scores, and I went back and watched the last quarter here this morning, and it was a 10-point ball game. Lawrence North was up by 10 with 4 minutes to go in the game, and I just wanted to see how it played out. And like Pike just stayed with it, and as in the Warsaw HSC game we talked about, made free throws. Like LN almost shot themselves out of the game by missed free throws, and so that matchup in the 4A state finals, if it comes down to free throws, like LN, you guys need to get your free throws. Work on free throws this week, please. But Pike just stayed with it. I mean, they came down. They had the ball with 7 seconds left to win the game. And you know, Pike put up. I don't know what they had the ball out of bounds on their side of the court, and I don't know. The shot selection wasn't. It was a 3 that like had no chance. And they actually almost got the offensive rebound. I think that LN traveled when they got the ball. I think there was like a second maybe left on the clock. And so I think that Pike should have had another opportunity to win that ball game, but they didn't, and the game was over. So it was a fascinating. So go back and watch at least the last 4 minutes of that ball game. It's entertaining, and it was a great game to watch.
Yeah. Courtney, you nailed. I mean, they're down 10, like in the fourth quarter, and then here they are with a sideline out of bounds. The reason why that's an interesting story, also, Courtney, is because they were tied with a sideline out of bounds against Plainfield earlier in the postseason in the sectional semifinal, and Kamari Booker got the ball and hit a game winner, and we talked about that and had her on the show and all of those things, but yeah, they were one possession away. Pike was one possession away.
I mean, that's Keith's team this year, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're in every game. They fight to the bitter end. And I mean, same thing with a lot of these other teams we talked about. I mean, just a really bright future because I think they bring back darn near everybody in that group. All the core comes back. Alana Devine's a phenomenal year. Marley Jeffers, the breakout star of the year. Kamari Booker really established herself this year. Yep. I mean, just phenomenal team all around. And the way that I think there's so much value in the road that they had to take. Yeah, it sucked having to play Brownsburg and Plainfield and Avon and Franklin Central, like all right in a row. And then Bloomington South, which we should talk about too, because that game was really competitive.
That's right.
But I think there's a lot of value in the momentum gained from having to navigate those teams. Like we see it every year in the North, and we saw it this year with Pike out of the South. And just, I mean, it's important to note too, that's an experienced team. Like they're going to be coming in with a couple deep postseason runs under their belt next year, which counts for so much moving forward this time of year, as you two can both attest, Courtney especially. So I tip of the cap to Pike on just a brilliant season. And two, we should mention Bloomington South gave them everything they could handle. Like that game was significantly more competitive than I was expecting it to be, if I'm being honest. Just, I mean, Bloomington South was really good.
Yeah, they were. They and they settled in too. So, Keith told me earlier in the week that he was going to kind of treat it like he's got a big football experience, but he was going to treat it like an offensive coordinator, and he was going to script the beginning of the game, and he was going to see different things as to how their pack line moved and what other alternate defenses they were going to play. So, and I think they jumped out I don't remember the exact number. I remember looking down at my phone. It was like 22-9. And I was like, well, that's going the way that we thought. Right. But then after that, say that again, Hank.
Wasn't Bloomington up for a lot of that game?
They might have been. I watched so many games yesterday.
I know, yeah.
I apologize to everybody if I messed that up. But I felt
you're thinking of Gibson Southern LN, I think, when it was 22-9.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, I remember looking down at one point in time, feeling good, and maybe it was just the first 3 possessions of the game. Maybe it was really, really,
Maybe you were
really
right.
early.
Yeah, 12-6, and then it went to 23-22. Sorry, I don't mean to keep blowing up your
No.
line of thought. 12-6 after a quarter, then 23-22 after 2. So maybe it was.
Yeah, but it does prove, regardless of it, that they settled in. The one thing that I will say very positively about Bloomington South is I think Keith in that game, just judging from maybe conversations that I had with him, maybe this was just a tacit feeling that I had. I kind of felt like that he didn't. I don't want to say give enough credit to the Bloomington South offense, that I think he was more focused on scoring the basketball against Bloomington South. Bloomington South got Pike to play their game. If they were going to win that game, they were going to have to win it 44-43, 42-40, something like that, right? And I think Keith was thinking, if we can get this thing in the 50s, it's you can book it. He couldn't get there. And Bloomington South, and we talked about that defense, and everyone's told us about it. I mean, we had Torrin Whitehead on here talking about it. With Larry Winters, that's the flagship of that program, and all of the texts that came through were about just their individual pieces. But it wasn't Lashley and Hall that people were texting about. Rojas Sapera, that little freshman, she's good. And Bloomington South, if you say that Pike is going to be really good next year, which they are going to be very good next year. So is Bloomington South. They return everybody. And then Rojas Sapera, their freshman point guard, is going to be a year older. They're going to have the experience to fall back on in a semi-state semifinal against Pike, who some thought was going to be a state finalist. Really good showing by Bloomington South. And they show that they're going to be a relevant storyline the entire calendar next year.
Court, did you have a chance to peek in on that one?
Just the scores, but no, I didn't.
Yeah. No, that was an interesting game. I was getting updates sporadically from Clark Wade, who was shooting highlights for us at that game, and just it's like, oh, Bloomington South's back in. Ooh, Bloomington South's up after a quarter. And then Jim Gordillo, a friend of the show, started texting me. It's like, ooh, they're up again. What's happening here? But yeah, I mean, Danny, you set it up perfectly for next year too. I mean, again, they bring everybody back at Bloomington South, so it's an exciting time for them down there, and just a good, really good team that's going to have that experience to build upon next year.
Hank, what do you make of the Kiki Butler thing? And we talked about Maddie Shirley. We talked about Jocelyn Bricker. We talked about, KK Holm. The kids that were actually in action. Okay. Kiki Butler, man. I think she's gotten over 20 points now in like 7 of 8 basketball games. She's been the key offensive piece for Lawrence North through this run. What is it going to take for her to inject herself into that conversation?
I included her, and anybody listening to this live who's already read my story from this morning, I forgot Maddie Shirley just because I was so focused on Warsaw and some of our teams around here that I forgot Maddie Shirley, but I'm going to get her added. I'm actually making a note to myself to do that right now because what she did against Greensburg was insane. But I think that she's right in that conversation because it's so wide open at this point. You just kind of get in a bunch of deserving names. You don't want to throw in everybody and oversaturate the market. But I think Kiki belongs in there. And I say that because she had the 10 points the first half yesterday, got him off to the strong start. But then in regionals, like the vision that I have of her the last time that I saw them play was just that regional game when it was her and Gaia Hurt taking over and them working in tandem where it was just kind of, one of them would score a big basket, but the other one assisted on it and vice versa. And, some of the defensive plays she made. So postseason success counts for a lot. And I think Kiki's really shined this year, and a kid who burst onto the scene over the summer is just, her recruiting stock really started to take off. You started hearing her name being thrown around there a lot. She was really good throughout the season, and to see what she did there in the regional obviously played a big role in beating Elsie in the sectional. Like that counts for a lot. And now they're playing at Gamebridge. So she's the same thing, same situation as Bricker, same situation as Vanessa Ross and Cameron Rowland. Like they have a chance now to showcase themselves at Gamebridge Fieldhouse. Brooks Artman too as well, obviously. Like they have a chance to show off for themselves on this season's biggest stage and really vault themselves moving forward. So as we talked about last night, Danny, I just think that Kiki Butler is one of those players set too, on just like a perfect launching pad. And knowing that team, I don't see her missing on that opportunity.
Yeah. She's electric. Mm-hmm. And she was really good. And her ability to attack the rim is obvious. But I think she's shooting the ball really well, too. She had the big corner 3 against Pendleton Heights. Her mid-range game has really taken a lot of strides. Like the mechanics on her mid-range game, which is a little bit of a cliche, but a lost art or whatever. I mean, and that's not necessarily because kids don't work on it. It's just the offenses don't dictate to facilitate that kind of opportunity for the kid. But she has a really good understanding now that I don't have to always get to the cup. Like I just got to get to the elbow. Like it's almost very, I mean, I'm not saying that she's Kobe Bryant, but it's very Kobe-like, right? Like Kobe would just get to his spots and then work on his shots once he got to those spots. Sometimes that spot is the short 17 elbow, but she's shooting that really well. She had another big one in the second half of the Pendleton Heights game from there. And then in this game, when they were chasing her off the 3-point line, she was getting to that spot in the paint and then hitting that little shot too. But I think she paced him with a team high, I think, again now for the second time in as many games in the postseason. So Kiki's been great.
Yeah, that's all sets the stage for what's going to be a very fun Saturday. We're still finalizing a guest list. We're actually going to start figuring out when we're going to start taping shows, but I'm at Media Day tomorrow, so we're going to work on that. I think we've lined up our first couple of Warsaw players, so the balls are rolling on that. We're going to have content throughout the week on the show. I'll have stuff all during the week on IndyStar.com. We thank you all so much for watching our semi-state recap show, and we'll talk to you here again in a couple days.